Iannielli, and I'm a male to female trans woman. And I have been going through some difficult times emotionally. I struggle from a condition called depression and gender dysphoria. I am really having emotional struggles, and I find that the medication that I take for my depression is not always the direction that I want to go. However, I trust my doctors, I trust my psychiatrist, obviously, and my therapist. My psychiatrist has me on a regimen of medications that supposedly will help me in helping cope with various issues, such as my major depressive disorder and my gender dysphoria is a whole other avenue that I could spend a whole half hour talking about. But I am trying to deal with the depression. I have had very bad times, and it landed me in the hospital many times, and it just seems like I'm in a rut and I just can't get out of it. And when I was young, and I don't really like to talk about it, but as I have mentioned in earlier videos, I was cross-dressing at a very young age, and I'm not proud of what I did, but as you all know, cross-dressing is probably a very for me, it was a way to deal with my gender confusion. I didn't know what to make of my inner turmoil and why I felt like I was female when I was born male. I had a lot of inner pain that I needed to address, and I was very young when I started to feel an urge to dress up in girls' clothes, and the only opportunity I really had was in private quarters and in secrecy, and I only had one dress that belonged to my sister that was a couple of sizes too big for her. So that was what I wore to help me with the feelings that I had. And I was young. I was only around 3 and 4 when I was doing it, but as I got older, it was very hard to cross-dress because I didn't have access to clothing. And when I turned between the age of 12 and 13, I wasn't old enough to work. I believe in order to get your working permit, you have to be 16 years old. And there are laws children and working. And I didn't have the good fortune of being a child actor where some make lots of money. Some are millionaires. So I didn't have that good fortune. And I had no money. But I had a desire to cross-dress. And I knew at the age of 13, I learned about a term that I felt described me to a T. No pun intended. Transsexual. I learned about that word after reading a biographical account of Dr. Renee Richards, who was a male to female transsexual, and she, as a male, was a tennis player, professionally ranked, who sought sex reassignment surgery to become female, and she still remained a professional in the tennis circuit. And she was also a well-known and highly regarded medical doctor. And when I read about her, it really struck a nerve for me personally, because all of the turmoil that I felt started to make sense to me. And I started to realize that I was the very essence of a female trapped in a male body. And the only way I could address those feelings of sadness and depression and desperation was to obviously cross-dress. However, I didn't have an allowance. I didn't work. I was too young, so I didn't have money. But that didn't stop me from wearing girls' clothes. And now you'll ask me, how did I go about getting girls' clothes? Well, it wasn't an easy thing, and I have had tremendous guilt, and I've noticed that these urges that I had back then have become they have started to happen again due to my depression, my ongoing struggle with gender dysphoria, and my bipolar disorder. Now, what I'm referring to is kleptomania. When I was 13, I specifically remember going to the mall. I took a bus, and I saw in the girls' department a dress that I fell in love with, and I was trying to figure out how I could have that. I didn't have money to buy it, but I knew in my heart I wanted it. And I'm not a bad person, and I don't condone what I did, and I certainly don't encourage anyone to do it. But for me, the only way I could cross-dress and have some sense of sanity in my life was to take the risk. Call it what you may, shoplifting, um, kleptomania. I stole the dress. Back then, merchandise wasn't as protected with those inventory tags like they are in most stores today. And I kind of find it interesting that in some stores they have inventory tags on just about everything. So you can't really even contemplate stealing. However, in other stores, they don't have any sort of anti-theft protection. And I just wonder why one store, as opposed to another, doesn't take that precaution. It really doesn't make sense. I'm sure that most stores have security cameras and are very aware. I am not a bad person. I have gone through a lot of emotional pain and struggle. Being transgender, God knows, it is one of the worst things that you could ever go through. And I have had times when I just wanted to end my pain. And I am struggling with depression, with joblessness, with possible foreclosure on my house, with a son who's autistic. I'm struggling with gender dysphoria. I'm struggling with bipolar disorder. And I have had a very difficult time. And I've landed in the hospital over a dozen times within the past 3 years. And that's why, though I want to have transsexual surgery, I can't get the medical clearance, the psychiatry clearance, psychiatric clearance. And I have done some research to see what causes people to take risks, whether it's kleptomania. And, I don't really want to do it, but I feel very empty inside, and I really struggle. And I have a lot of issues, and I just wish that I could have more control in my life and figure out what makes me the way I am. Why was I born different? Why do I have a mind and a soul of a woman, yet I have a body of a man? I could never quite figure that out. Why was I always drawn to feminine clothing? I despised wearing men's clothing and boys' clothing. I had no desire whatsoever in wearing male clothing. And it's very odd that when I resorted to the stealing, it was only female clothing. I would never think twice about stealing an article of men's clothing. I just had no desire. And, I don't know if it's a cry for help. I don't know why I do these things. All I know is that I'm scared. I truly am scared. I have no control in my life. I don't work. I'm on disability. I can lose my house any day now. And I just feel totally lost and alone. And I don't know what is gonna give. What is gonna make things improve? I just feel hopeless. And I don't understand why I have to be in so much pain. I lost my mom, God rest her soul. She struggled with severe depression. She had, what is the term? Manic depression, and she had schizophrenia. And I just witnessed her deteriorate, and it was the worst thing that I had to witness. To see my mom wither away in the hospital, I just couldn't deal with it. And all that suffering, and my own internal conflict, and seeing my dad struggle with alcoholism because of his job stress. It just seemed like, why? Why do these things happen? And my dad struggled mightily, but he was there, and he was a strong person. Yet in the end, he succumbed to his depression and committed suicide. So I always try to find an inner strength that gives me a reason to want to live. And sometimes I don't want to live. I get tired. I'm frustrated. I'm depressed. I feel I have no purpose. I have no sense of what my life is all about. And I'm not saying that work defines us, but even though I hated every day going to work and dealing with all the nonsense, I feel that it was at least a healthy existence, because you had a place to go and you had structure, and work provided that structure. But now that I'm out of work and I'm on disability, thank God, I don't have structure anymore. And I am very alone, I'm very isolated, and I'm very depressed. And on top of that, I struggle with my gender. I'm a male to female, transgender woman, and I have always knew from my early teenage years what I was, but I couldn't tell anyone. It was very difficult. And I don't know why I was born this way. And the only times that I felt happy was when I was cross-dressing. And cross-dressing was a very common theme in my life. And I had those urges to satisfy my struggles by cross-dressing. And in order to get access to clothes, when I wasn't yet old enough to work, I resorted to shoplifting, stealing. They always say it's the quiet ones that cause the most noise. I am very, very sad. I don't know sometimes what true happiness means. I do have joy in my life. I have a son who I love and adore, and I am there for him as best I can be. And I am a father to my son, and I always tell him that. But I'm also a transgender woman, and there's nothing I can do about that. I tried to live a normal life as a male. I tried to do the right things. I went to college. I met a girl. I married. We had a son. We bought a house. But the one thing that I could never escape was my internal conflict with my mind, heart, and soul, and my physical body. That is called gender dysphoria. And people do all sorts of things to address those painful feelings. And sadly, a lot of people who are transgender don't have the wherewithal or the inner strength to live. They just get so disillusioned with their life that they feel they have no reason to go on. And it's very tragic, yet it does happen quite often. You know, I've told in a previous video I did my feelings about that poor young teenage girl, Leila Alcorn, who tragically committed suicide and even posted her suicide note because her parents did not accept her as a trans girl and tried to convert her with conversion therapy, which does not help the matter. It only makes it worse. And in Leila Alcorn's case, it led her to the brink, which sadly resulted in her suicide. And it is such a sad and painful story, and when you think about it, you wonder why. It just doesn't make sense, you know. And I don't know, I really don't, why people seem to have a very negative view of transgender people. I could never figure that out. And I know I'm biased, obviously, because I am male to female transgender. So I know, speaking from my own experiences, I feel the way I do, and why I have such a strong opinion on my disappointment and disillusionment of those in the mainstream who harshly judge us for just trying to be happy and live according to how we truly feel. No one should tell us how we should live. Who are they? Why would they want to judge us? We don't judge them. So why should they judge us? It's not fair. We're just trying to be happy. We're just trying to go about our lives. We all want happiness. We're not going to live forever. And by far, we don't want to die without experiencing what we felt we should have in our life. We don't want to die with regret. And when I lost my dad to suicide, and my mom many years earlier to depression, and then I lost a close friend unexpectedly within 2 years of my dad's suicide. And he happened to be very supportive to me in the wake of my dad's suicide. He was the very first person that called me, and he spent hours on the phone listening to me. And I was so happy and grateful that someone truly cared. And 2 years later, I learned that he had passed away in his sleep. And when I went to his funeral, his wake, it was a devastation. I was devastated. I was trying to console his wife, and I was so sad for his little baby girl. But I was inconsolable myself. I couldn't stop crying. And right then and there, I realized, life is unpredictable. We don't know how long we have. And that's when I came to the reality that I have to seek therapy again. And, I knew that I had to confront what I have always avoided, which was my transgender struggle. And I knew it was going to impact on my family, my son, my wife, and I knew it was going to impact on my job, and I knew it was going to impact on my sisters' lives and their families' lives, and I knew it was going to impact on my friends' lives. But I didn't know what to do. All I knew was I had to get it off my chest. I had to open up. I had to address what I so long avoided